So family and I got away to Florida, and it was good. Kind of pulling away for a time, getting a different perspective, different rhythm, different scenery. We got to see our friends, the Sheridans. They all say hi. I sent them regards as well. It's been 10 years they've been down there, and it's exciting to see them again and again. Old friends, catch up, appreciate different things. And down there where they live, near Jacksonville in northern Florida, it's a completely different culture. Completely different. I mean, northern Florida, it's hot. It's about 90 degrees there. It's kind of a mix of urban sprawl and redneck culture. It's just like a really different vibe. And there's all kinds of people moving in. And so you see subdivisions just going in everywhere. And every time we go down, there's a new road, there's new this and that. And so lots of things being built. And it's very much in America's Bible Belt as well. There's so many different churches of many different kinds. And there's an openness to spiritual things. You see people wearing T-shirts, things about Jesus, and there's very, very forward and bold. And so it's good. It's different. It's a different atmosphere, but it's interesting. You know, we go there and then we come home and we enjoy it there, but we also acknowledge, hey, we're just not Floridians. You know, we love to visit, but we're Yankees, and this kind of, for better or worse, this is, you know, who we are. You know, it's great there, but you know, if we had to live there, yes, we would, but it's a matter of personal judgment that it's not where we belong. And so here we come to this passage talking about judgment, and what Jesus says: "Judge not, lest ye be judged." It's our culture's favorite Bible verse, but there's a lot here, and I think our culture gets it very wrong in some different ways. So let's go through it, and we're going to go through more of this section, which is called the Sermon on the Plain in Luke's Gospel. It's similar in some ways to Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel, but we're in Luke 6, the Sermon on the Plain, and I'll read it again. It says, "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For with the measure you use it will be measured back to you." So, judge not, lest you be judged. What does it mean? What do you think it means? Does it mean to make no judgments whatsoever? Make no distinctions? So if someone asks you what color the sky is, you say gray because you're in Connecticut, right? No, I mean blue, right? Yeah. So it's Mother's Day. It's blue today, I think. I'm pretty sure. So can you not give an answer because you're not supposed to judge? It's impossible to not make any judgments, right? Because we can't. We have to live. I have to distinguish. This is a Bible. This is a podium. You know, if you make no judgments whatsoever, you get a prize, and the prize is a white cane and a pair of complimentary sunglasses because you're blind. You're not able to see. So no, Jesus is not forbidding us from saying the sky is blue or that doing drugs is bad for people. No, he's not forbidding that whatsoever. You have to make such judgments. It's obvious. What Jesus is doing is he's forbidding condemning people or prejudicing ourselves against them for how they look, you know, something else we know. We're not the final judge. That's what he's saying. So we don't prejudice ourselves, we don't condemn people, but we do make judgments. We have to make judgments. And what Jesus is saying here is that the judgments we make, however, we need to extend the same leeway that we extend to ourselves. So that the measure that we use will be back used against us. So if we are generous with others, God will be generous with us because he's a generous judge. And last week I gave a grammar session about the Bible when we started this section where it said, "Blessed are the poor, blessed are the hungry." You know, who is the blessor? It's God, right? So the measure that's used for or against us when we judge or when we forgive, we will get back in return by God because he is the one who blesses. He's the one who forgives. He's the one who judges back. So when we see someone with generous eyes and we choose to be patient and bless them, even though they are undeserving from other things we might be able to say about them, what does God do for you? He returns blessing on you, undeserving one, right? He's patient with your shortcomings. So let me give a wildly hypothetical scenario that I'm sure none of you can relate to. Someone cuts you off in traffic. I know, it never happens. It never happens. Even on the way to church, because they know when you're on your way to church, there's a halo over your vehicle, and so nothing can get in the way. No, yeah, probably it happened to someone on your way here. So they cut you off, and what's your judgment about them? Okay, we're a family atmosphere here. What's your judgment? Okay. What story do you tell about them? You see their flawed behavior, and you can't pretend otherwise, right? You can't just say, okay, that was okay. God says, don't bear false witness. That's number 9 of the Big 10, right? Yeah, you can't bear false witness. You need to live in the real world. It was a bad thing that they did. And we have to live in the real world, especially when we drive on Route 2. Indeed, they did cut you off. The dash cam doesn't lie. And neither should you lie, Christian. You have to acknowledge reality. So the question is, what should we think of this person? How should we judge them? Perhaps they have no idea what they're doing. Perhaps they do have a white cane that they got behind the wheel. Or maybe they do know they were being reckless. Yeah, and they had an emergency. Maybe that's it. Yeah, right? Or they're worthy of my sympathy in some way. I'd hate to be them with such recklessness and ignorance or I don't know if I want to say stupidity. Maybe that's not I know parents are saying pastor shouldn't say that word, but we need to have a degree. We need to be able to say, hey, have pity, compassion on them, even as they do wrong things that affect me. And that's a real battle. That's a real battle. And we need to also be reminded in that moment of ways that we fall short. Have we ever done anything wrong on the motorways? And if you have a question about that and your spouse is here, they can help you. So we need to judge generously and then ask, okay, what has God forgiven me of? How has he been patient with me? And maybe I can, in time, forgive them, hopefully quickly. And then not just dwell upon it throughout my day, throughout my week, thinking about how I can get back at them, how I can tailgate them and follow them to their house and give them a piece of my mind. Or whatever else you might be thinking about, right? I don't know if your mind goes down these places, there might be, but we have to give it up to God. We have to forgive, not saying that they deserve no consequences. We forgive. I'm no longer judge. God is their judge. And so he will give to them consequences as he sees fit. It may involve law enforcement at some point, whatever. But I give it up to him. I'm no longer the judge. It's no longer my burden. God is judge alone. And so, it's not my job to solve all driver misbehavior. Or it's not my job to solve all this other stuff. I have to acknowledge it for what it is and take it back to God and look at them with mercy that God gives me. So Jesus expects us to see people sinning and be bothered by it. That's true, and we should be bothered by it. But the thing he's trying to teach us here is that because of grace, we just can't react in that moment. We have to respond with a grace like Jesus responds with grace towards us. That there's a way we automatically go into enemy mode so quickly, and whatever it might be. It might be on the road, it might be at work, it might be with our family, a Mother's Day brunch you're going to afterwards, this thing sets you off. We just can't react. We have to respond with an understanding of grace and God's grace towards us. So Jesus goes on. Luke 6, verse 39. And Jesus kind of goes along with it. He says, Jesus told them a parable. Can a blind man lead a blind man? So this is in association with a judging thing. Can a blind man lead a blind man? Will they not both fall into a pit? A disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone, when he is fully trained, will be like his teacher. So Jesus is talking about the blind, a blind man leading a blind person. So the first kind of blind could be like what I said before, those who say they can't make any judgments whatsoever. They have made themselves kind of a literalist in this area, a fundamentalist, so to speak, that they have to be radically inclusive and not judge anything or anyone, just be nice. And that's their gospel. So they moralistically preach against making moralistic judgments. It doesn't make sense, but that's there are people like this and very judgmental about being non-judgmental and blinding themselves. And some of these people, they're very smart, but they've trained themselves in this, what they think is grace, but it's actually insanity. Because you can't blind yourself to reality and truth. You can't blind yourself to it, how God made the world and God says in his word, and then not fall in the pits that you refuse to see and lead others into those same pits. So that's one kind of blind. But the second kind of blind are the Pharisees and other religious people who can't see their own sin, but they see all the sins, all the faults of everyone, and they'll let everyone know about it. And so in most places where Jesus uses these words of blind leading or blind guiding or blind guides, he's referring to the Pharisees and these religious leaders, these kind of blind people. In Matthew, he says, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites, for you shut the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, for you neither enter yourselves nor allow those who go in." So Jesus is saying, woe to you. You're preaching this moralistic religion about all the things going on, but you travel across the sea to make a single convert, and you make him twice as much a child of hell as yourselves. And that's, Jesus is preaching against this kind of blindness, this moralistic religion, a kind of fundamentalism on the other side. And he says, you're straining out a gnat and swallowing a camel because you don't see the darkness that you have inside. And this is what Jesus often says. It's you blind leading the blind. And it's usually always talking about the Pharisees. In Matthew 23, he's shouting it. He says it in John chapter 9 as well. It's kind of like when the organist at the stadium starts playing Three Blind Mice when the umpires take the field. That's the subplot, what's going on, right? Here comes the Pharisees, three blind mice. That's how Jesus speaks. He says, for judgment I've come into the world. So here's the one who says, don't judge. No, he says, it's all about judgment and discriminating between those who may see and those who become blind. And the Pharisees overhear it, and they say, are we also blind? And Jesus told them, if you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say that we see, your guilt remains. They are blind. It's the way of judgmental religion. Blind leaders who say they know everything. They know exactly how everything should be done in this order, in this way. They know how to size up everyone, and they'll give you right away. They're always quick in Christian circles. They'll say, I have the gift of discernment. And usually it's you have the gift of judgmentalism, because you're able to quickly say, you're a sinner, you're an outcast, you're ugly, you're stupid. They give labels to people very quickly, very prone to judge. And that's a spirit. There's different kinds of blindness on different sides, the left and the right. And some of the people who call themselves non-judgmental are some of the most judgmental people of all. So Jesus continues, and with this other illustration that I'm sure most of us have heard, Luke 6, verse 41, why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, brother, let me take the speck that is in your eye, when you yourself do not see the log that is in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the log out of your own eye, and then you'll be able to see clearly to take out the speck that is in your brother's eye. So Jesus is bringing home the same point. Don't prejudge or condemn people outright because of the dust that you see. Yeah, the dust is there. Yeah, they got their issue, they got their flaw, but be concerned about this big log stuck in your own eye, your own faults, the thing that's blinding you. Look first at your own faults, even if it's hardest for us to see them. Once again, he's saying don't pretend that everything is great. That's niceness. That's a false gospel of just pretending everything is good. Oh, yeah, everything's nice. Yeah. No, that's real. Your brother has a real problem that's in need of a remedy, but you need to first attend to yourself, so that you can face things clearly, reality. And we need to also be aware that we're usually most bothered, the things that we're most bothered in other people, why are we most bothered by them? Because we're dealing with it. Yeah, it's something that we're really wrestling with, or we feel proud about in some way. And yeah, it's many times it's really about us. So we have to relinquish that. We have to ask God, what's going on with me before what's going on with them? And we see it whenever we go on a diet, or when I go on a diet, at least. It's not, it needs to happen more, right? What happens? We become more judgmental, not just about ourselves, but what everyone else is eating, right? I look at you with the chocolate chip cookie, and I say, oh, I'm better than you, right? That's what we do. And I say, I puff up myself, and I'm being a good boy, and I look up, I give myself gold stars, I look down at you, and I judge you with a condemning attitude, self-righteous. I know what's going on. You don't. You're gonna gain that weight, and I'm gonna be, doing great. So. But what Jesus is saying is we as Christians can't live by those kind of games. Yes, you can go on a diet, but you can't have that attitude. You can't be in the scheme of religious pretending, known as hypocrisy, putting on a false face, putting on a front, saying, oh yeah, I've got it all together. No, since we are Christians, The way we get in is by grace, and we have to live by grace. So we have to cling to him and the gospel, and then let the fruit of his righteousness grow from the inside out. Not, here I am, I got it all together, I know everything, I got it all down. Jesus illustrates this more with this idea of the tree. And when he's talking about trees are usually symbolic of people. So think of that as we read verse 43 and following. For no good tree bears bad fruit, nor again does a bad tree bear good fruit, for each tree is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorn bushes, nor are grapes picked from bramble bush. The good person out of the good treasure of his heart produces good, and the evil person out of his evil treasure produces evil, for out of the abundance of the heart his mouth speaks. So Jesus is saying we can't judge people completely. That's not our role. But he expects us to do what? Judge the fruit that each person produces, whether it be good fruit or bad fruit. You know, we have to make judgments. We have to see what that fruit is, and we can't write things off. And it's through the Holy Spirit working on us, giving us goodness that we don't have ourselves, that we can produce good fruit. And as Paul explains in Galatians, it says the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. That's the good fruit. And so we don't judge. We don't see everything, but we can see fruit. And on the other hand, we see bad fruit, right? And it shows that there's something wrong there. There's something amiss. There's some sin there. And we are not in the role to condemn, but we can say, hey, I'm not sure if I'm going to give them everything, you know? So Paul goes into Galatians about what these fruit are, the works of the flesh are, and how they don't inherit the kingdom of God. But to go back to what Jesus is saying, he says we need to not make final judgments about people, but he does expect us to see reality of what's happening in their lives. What's the fruit? Evaluate those things. And so if someone says that they're a Christian, but they can't help but curse people's names, and they're constantly negative about everything and everyone, I'm not going to associate with them as if they are a Christian, no matter what they say, because I'm looking at the fruit, right? But, you know, since I'm not God, I can't say if they're going to heaven or hell for sure, but I might keep my distance and say, you know, if you want to join my church, hey, I have some questions. Let's address this. And that's not being hypocritical. It's just seeing what's obvious. You know, it's not prying into them like, hey, when you constantly lambast that person in anger, what's going on there? You know, not it's having a conversation and before the Lord, knowing that we're prone to anger just like they are, right? And that's God's working on us there, but with humility, say, you know, this is how the Spirit of God works. And so the question I might have with such a person, the biggest question is, have you experienced the grace of Christ for yourself? I want to know about that experience. Have you received the grace of the gospel? And what happened? Was there joy? And how does that experience of grace change how you see everything today? Because if you've truly experienced that grace, it changes everything. It changes how you see yourself and how you see other people. And that's what Jesus is pointing to in this section of Luke 6. Have we experienced grace? Or am I still clinging to the judge's seat? Or have I released that place to God alone? It's like, yeah, I'm off of that pedestal. God is there. And I'm now living under grace and extending grace to others, the same grace that I've received myself. Am I at peace with that? Knowing that he is judge and he sees all things clearly. He sees things that I can't see. And when I insist that I'm always in the right, that I see things best, I need to see, I need to acknowledge my limits just as I came to Christ at first. Acknowledge my own limits, acknowledge my own sin, acknowledge the mercy that I've received from God so that I can be merciful towards others. Because the verse before the section that we finished up with last week is very evident. Be merciful as your Father is merciful. So how do we begin to be merciful? Not by making excuses for sin, not by blinding ourselves to an ideology that says everyone on my side, my team, is carte blanche, is good, and everyone on their team is always evil. It's not how we extend mercy. It's by recognizing the evil Jesus has delivered us from and the mercy that we've received. There's many different kinds of ways of being a Pharisee. All different ways, all different flavors. But it's all about how good we are, how great I am, how I see things right. And we can get our news that way with self-righteousness and clothe ourselves with self-righteous garb. But even if we have the right ideas, as long as we have that self-righteousness, that vindictive spirit, we are doing the devil's work. Even if we have the right so-called position, the way we do the Lord's work is to receive the Lord's mercy on a daily basis, to have generous hearts extended to others, saying, this is what God has done for me. He can do it for you as well, no matter who you are and what you've done. Yes, that is evil. That is wretched. But such was a wretch as me that he saved. While I was still a sinner, Christ died for me. I'm not righteous. I must remember I'm saved by God's grace before, when I prayed to receive Christ, but I'm also saved by grace today in a daily way. I'm never finished with a grace that saves. I always live by grace. That's what it means to be a Christian, to be sanctified again and again, and turning away from our fleshly passions, trusting in his word, and living through the power of his Spirit. Because when we first hear the gospel, Jesus opens us up to two things. These two elements must always be a reality when we hear the gospel. Number one is the grace of Christ, right? Number two is our sin. And that his grace is greater than our sin. And that this grace of Christ must train us to think differently, to think anew. That because we are new creations of Christ, we can't choose judgment over grace, because grace has triumphed over judgment at the cross. And so when I look at someone, even as they're deep in sin, doing evil things, I need to look with mercy, the same mercy God had for me. Even as we know all sins deserve condemnation. Christ chose grace for us. As Paul said, for the love of Christ controls us, because we have concluded that one has died for all, therefore all have died, and that Jesus, he died for all, that those who live might no longer live for themselves, but live for him who for their sake died and was raised. From now on, therefore, we regard no one according to the flesh. Even though we once regarded Christ that way, we regard him no longer. That's what grace does. We let the love of God control us so that we see things differently. We see through the eyes of grace. We don't see people as screw-ups or enemies or even obstacles in my way. You ever treat people as obstacles? I need to get there, and this person's in the way, and they're not longer a person that Jesus loves. There's someone in my way. Getting in the way of my agenda. And that's so dangerous. And that's how we tend to live. The cashier at the coffee shop, whoever it might be, Jesus says we can't live that way anymore. We have to live in view of God's mercy. And he's not asking us to pretend that every lifestyle and every choice is equally good. They're obviously not. But he's asking us to be real about our need for forgiveness and then reach out to those people that we might be naturally repelled by. And for you, you might know who those people are. They live this way, they dress this way. Regularly I run into people that have, so many piercings and tattoos. And I think, this is someone who's crying out to be noticed. And maybe they're looking to shock me or others, but I need to see them with the eyes of Christ. And, again, it's not a sin to be tattooed or to have piercings, but there's something going on with them that put them in that spot, that communicates something, right? It's some fruit. I don't know. They could be a Christian for all I care. But for me, I have to consciously not react. I have to respond with grace. Because, if this person's one of those judgmental Christians, they're doing this and that. But if instead we are gracious and we're kind, we're curious, we get to know them as a person with a story, and we show mercy, we show who we belong to, our Father. Our world is changing. Our neighborhoods are changing. My neighborhood is progressively becoming more and more diverse. I don't know about your neighborhood, but probably in the next decade it'll become majority minority. And Glastonbury is no longer a lily white suburb. We have different nations on our streets, and I understand immigration is a big issue this election season, and it should be a big issue. But at the same time, we need to deal with individual immigrants and our neighbors as people and be able to distinguish the political issue and the different things that people have to decide from the person in front of me and how we relate to them with the mercy of Christ, right? We need to be able to show the same mercy, the same grace God has given to us. And that's what we try to do with our estuary meetings. We have people who are not believers, but they come because they feel valued and they want to be safe to share whatever experience they have, wherever background they have, and because they don't want to be treated as a number, because that's what the world treats them, as an obstacle or as a resource. Human resources. You ever thought about that? How we label people like that in our jobs? You're not a person, you're a human resource that we can, drain out at the end of your day, and then you're retired and you're a withered soul. Human resources. Anyway, you're people made in God's image, people who are loved, people whose ideas and thoughts matter. And that's what the church is supposed to be, and that's what we try to do for Estuary. And so that hey, someone heard me today. Someone knows me. And that our lives can connect to this larger story of God and his redemptive power that goes beyond even this world that I see, even beyond my lifetime. Because if we believe that God is stingy with his grace and his love, we will be stingy. We will do the bare minimum to get by and preserve ourselves. And if a church believes that God is stingy and is all about self-preservation, God won't send them people. He will send them people to a generous church who is generous with how they view people and how they are open before them. Because if we know the generosity of God, if we know the mercy that he's given to us, God will shower us with blessing. If God is for us, who can be against us? He would not spare his own son, but gave him up for us all. How will he not also with him graciously give us all things? Because Scripture says God's generosity is not bounded by the same things that we are bound by, our experience, our limited supply. God's supply is not limited. He tells us not to worry, but to live our lives with joy in him, for what he's done. And that God will fill us when we need it. And we will need it. But we can depend on his generosity because he's the one who gave us everything at the cross. And that a generous spirit can be the weapon against the forces of darkness. And this generous spirit that sees people with love and joy is what we can expect. And that's how we reap when we're generous. We're generous with our money, but generous with our souls. We will reap souls. Because that's what people are attracted by, generosity of spirit and a joy that is a magnet. God blesses us when we are channels of his blessing. Our neighbors are not engineering problems to be solved. They are people who need what we need, the love of God. And when we look at others with generous eyes that say, I see you, you matter, I'm in your presence, I'm not on my way somewhere else. I'm guilty of this too. When we connect with our eyes, we judge with our eyes for good or bad. When we see people, we look at them in the eye. We have a platform to share the love of Christ. When we don't, when we use our noses and we turn up our noses at others, we've lost the game. We've lost it. And that's how we've often lost people as Christians. We turn up our noses, we're looking beyond them to someone else we think is better for whatever reason, but we need to see with generous eyes of mercy, the same mercy God has given us. And so if God convinces us of his love in this way, we can expect more fruit. And God's kingdom can grow. And this church can become a greenhouse for God's future. Yes, we might not win all of Glastonbury to Jesus, but we can be a greenhouse that grows good plants to the glory of God that will last for eternity in his kingdom. And that's his role for us, to be a greenhouse. Maybe that be a motto for us. It's not like everything will be green, but some things will be preserved and given glory to God, and great things will grow, knowing that whatever we do in the name of the Lord will be in vain. If we can remember once again God's generous love for us, how he sees us, then we can judge generously with others. And we can show that we care not just with our words, but with our eyes. And we can look at other people and we can smile and reflect the joy that God has given to us, so the joy can be magnified to other people, they reflecting the same joy as well. That's what God has for us as a people, as individuals and as a church, to judge generously. Because once we were not a people, but now we are God's people. Once we have not received mercy, but now we have received mercy. Let's pray. Father,